There are, the text that you have in your bulletin is what we call an alternate text to the regular Sunday. The regular text for this Sunday is found in the 4th chapter of Mark, beginning at the 35th verse. On that day, when evening came, he said to them, "Let us go across to the other side." Leaving the crowd behind, they took him with him in the boat, just as he was. Other boats were with him. A great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat, so that the boat was already being swamped. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him up and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" He woke up and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." Then the wind ceased, and there was a dead calm. He said to them, "Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great awe and said to one another, "Who is this that even the wind and the sea obey him?" Here ends the gospel for this Sunday. Please be seated. It was in the winter of 1967. I was going to graduate school at the University of North Dakota while I had the parish in Thief River Falls, Minnesota. It was actually in early October, normally when you would not expect a great storm. But as I left for class that night from Thief River Falls for the 60-mile trip to Grand Forks, it started to snow. And I listened to the weather forecast, and they said that there might be intensive snow that evening. I really wasn't that afraid. I could go to the class for the 3 hours and come back. It would take me a little over an hour to get back to Thief River Falls, not to be concerned. But when I came out of class 3 hours later, it was snowing pretty badly, and the wind had come up probably 20 or 30 miles an hour. I did something very stupid. I started back home. I can make it before it gets too bad. It was not more than 4 or 5 miles out of Grand Forks that I, wondering if I'd made a mistake. But I proceeded on. I figured I was in a place where I probably could make it very easily. The road wasn't too bad at that point, and I could make it. It was not long after that the roads started to fill up. I was unable to see the roads anymore, and the wind intensified. It was not long before the roads grew slippery, and I slipped just a little bit off the side of the road and got stuck. Snow tires hadn't been installed by this time. And all of a sudden, I was wondering what I was going to do. There was absolutely no traffic, even though it was a pretty busy highway usually. So I sat there, and little by little, what seemed like hours, but I'm sure was not more than a few minutes, I started to become afraid. I couldn't move. There was no traffic. The wind was blowing. The roads were filling in. I was sure I couldn't make it even if I got back on the road. I sat there for at least 30 minutes. Not one car. Not one indication that anything was going to come along that would make it all right for me to be there. And suddenly, for the first time in my life, and this is at the age of about 30, I'm starting to think, I'm going to die. The road is going to fill up, and I'm just going to be left here. the road did fill up. It got about to the height of 3 feet. I knew that I was going to have to try and find some way to make it through the night. As I listened to what was left of the radio station, they predicted that the snow would get worse, the winds would come up. If you're on the roads, get off them quickly, and if you haven't started out, don't. It's very dangerous out there tonight. I started thinking of things that I should have done. Listened very more carefully to the radio stations and their announcers. Taken some precaution to have blankets in the car. Probably gotten my snow tires on early or chains in the car. I wasn't going to make it. And I sat and I prayed. And I said, God, I don't think I'm going to make it. But just know that I have full faith and it's all right. It was not long after that a large truck, actually a gasoline-hauling truck, came along. I got out of the car and waved because I didn't think he could see the car anymore. He stopped. He said, I'll go before you and break the snow, and you can follow me into the nearest town, and you will be safe. I know what it's like to be afraid of a storm. I've been in many storms. I have been in tornadoes. I have been in hurricanes. I have been worried about lava flow. It's scary. In our text today, we're talking about a storm. Why Mark gives any credence to this, I don't know. I guess it was to say the Lord is chief over the elements of nature. I guess that's the point of the story. But it seems to me that there are more lessons that can be learned from this task. The first thing is that storms are going to come up. Storms are going to come up no matter where you live. It's going to be a tornado or a hurricane or a tsunami or a lava flow or whatever. But storms will come in, and you need to be prepared for them. You need to understand that that's always a possibility. It's just recently that the Meteorological Society of the United States has started naming hurricanes. As early as 1953, they started naming hurricanes so you could identify them, so you would be able to tell one from the other, and you would be able to keep track of what was going on and where it was. At first, they had only female names, but in 1979, they began giving male names to hurricanes. It's a practical thing, but it isn't something recent. In the early 1800s, they started naming hurricanes after saints in the Catholic Church. The Santa Ana in 1825 that hit Puerto Rico so badly was named after a Catholic monk. In World War II, the soldiers in the South Pacific started naming the hurricanes after their girlfriends or wives. I guess as kind of a joke, but that's what they did. The interesting thing is that we have to name the hurricanes in our life so we can deal with them. What is your hurricane? Hurricane cancer? Hurricane divorce? Hurricane unemployment? Hurricane financial crisis? Hurricane grade point average? Hurricane child illness? What's your hurricane? What's your storm? Life is fragile. And into every life comes some detour from our normal course of behavior that threatens us and sometimes terrifies us. The first thing that you can say about storms is that they will come, and they will come into your life somewhere along the way. Every person in this church has been affected by some hurricane in their life, and some are affected very much by it right now. The second thing that we need to talk about when we talk about storms is there is a certain amount we can do for preparedness. It seems kind of silly in this Gospel of Mark that the disciples, many of who were fishermen, didn't know enough to travel at that particular time when a storm was looming. They were familiar with sailing on the Sea of Galilee. Most of the time they stayed very close to shore. It was not wise to go out very far because it was deep and those boats were not very seaworthy. Why didn't the disciples prepare better? I guess because Jesus told them to go across, and at that point they had faith. But when the storm came up, they were way beyond what they could handle. And they started to scream. They started to be concerned. They were going to die. And they came to look at Jesus, and he's sleeping on the stern. Where is Jesus when we need him? That's often the call that goes out when we're in the midst of a storm. Jesus slept well in storms. But the disciples should have been prepared just a little better. A little foresight will take care of a lot of storms. When we were attacked in Pearl Harbor in 1941, one of the things that we were not is prepared. And we knew it was coming. The predictor, the pundits were all saying, we are going to be attacked sometime soon by Japan. And Congress and the president just didn't get anything going. And the historians are telling us that if they would have attacked California, the country would have been in deep jeopardy. Fortunately, they attacked Pearl Harbor, and we had enough time to get ready to provide a major conflict. We often have people criticizing because we always are supporting the military. But history has told us time and time again, if we're not prepared, we can be caught in a very unpredictable situation about our future. It is kind of interesting how the people in Florida, when a hurricane comes, it's kind of a ho-hum thing. They have gone through this time and time again. They have the things that board up their windows. They have evacuation routes. They have all kinds of preparedness that they do in order to survive because they've done it many, many times. Something that would terrify us doesn't terrify them anymore. There is a certain amount of preparedness that we can do for things in our life. Sometimes we just don't pay attention to the obvious, that we are going to have an illness, that we are going to have a financial crisis, we are going to have trouble with our parents or our children. Some preparation can be made. But the third thing, and I guess what the text is trying to say, is that if the faith is strong, it gets you through the storms even when you haven't prepared for them. That is the message. The alternate text, or the regular text for this Sunday from the Old Testament, is about David and Goliath. There's an interesting thing to note about David and Goliath's story. The kingdom of Israel was in terror about the Philistines because of this giant. He was causing all kinds of disdain with the Israelites, and the giant was summoned to to face Israel, and any warrior that they could come with, he would challenge them, and the loser would give in to the winner, and his country would be in the possession of the winning team. Saul is terrified. Who in my kingdom can face him? This man who is the first king of Israel, all of a sudden doesn't have any faith. This God that rescues us is gone. Where is God when we need him? And there's a young boy that comes out. His name is David. And he hears about the giant, and he says, just another human being. David has faith in his God. He becomes the next king, and under his kingship, Israel rises to its highest point in its history. Is David prepared? He certainly is. He is a shepherd, and shepherd with a slingshot, who has practiced time and time again to kill the animals that will come after his sheep. Those shepherds were deadly with those slingshots. And David comes to the king. The king has said, anybody who takes on this Goliath and wins, I'll give him half my kingdom and my daughter. David said, that sounds like a pretty good deal to me. And he looks at the giant and he says, ho hum, God is with me. This is a piece of cake. You know the rest of the story. You see, when we don't have any faith, the giants loom so large. Those storms seem so great. And sometimes, yes, maybe all the time, we need just to have a little faith. God will triumph. The end will be in God's hands. The message today is simple. Storms will come. A great deal of dealing with the storms can be hindered by not being prepared. But in the end, it is the faith in God that takes us through the storm, because he does have control over the world. And the end, no matter what is now, the end is in God's hand. Amen. Sermon hymn, How Firm a Foundation,